7 words appeared on a sleeping bag in the middle of a frozen December night. 7 words written in purple crayon by hands too small to understand the weight they carried. 7 words that would echo through congressional halls, spark national debates, and ultimately rewrite federal policy. But nobody can explain this part. The man sleeping under that blanket had been completely invisible for 1,095 days. More than 40,000 people had walked directly past him during those 3 years. Businessmen in expensive suits stepped over his legs without breaking stride. Mothers pulled their children away when they got too close. Police officers told him to move along at least twice a week. Yet a second grader saw something every adult had trained themselves to ignore. She saw an orange cat refusing to abandon the human everyone else had already forgotten. That cat had followed this man through ice storms and heat waves, through 4 different states and countless cities where they were never welcome, through nights when the wind chill dropped to -15, and the only warmth came from pressing close together inside a torn sleeping bag. Why would any animal choose that existence? How did that cat know to stay when walking away would have meant food, shelter, and safety? And what could 7 words from a child possibly do to change a fate that seemed permanently sealed? Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications, because what you are about to discover will fundamentally alter how you see the invisible people living in every city across this country. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a former Marine Corps scout sniper who served his nation with distinction before his nation forgot he existed. This is the story of Ranger, a battle-scarred tomcat who understood loyalty in ways that challenge everything scientists claim to know about animal cognition. This is the story of Emma Rodriguez, whose inability to look away from suffering would expose a crisis that politicians had spent decades pretending did not exist. Before we go any further, smash that like button, because this story needs to reach as many people as possible. Then drop a comment telling me exactly where you are watching from right now. What city, what country. Your engagement determines whether stories like this get told or get buried. So make your voice heard in the comments right now. Now let me take you back to where the invisible part of this story actually began. Not in that doorway in December 2019, but 6 years earlier in a place most Americans only know from headlines. They scroll past without reading. Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, July 2013. Marcus Chen was 29 years old and 3 weeks away from completing his 4th deployment. As a Marine Corps scout sniper, he had enlisted at 19, driven by a complicated mix of patriotism, family tradition, and the limited options available to a kid from a dying industrial town in Ohio. His father had served in Desert Storm. His grandfather had fought in Vietnam. Military service was not just expected in the Chen family. It was the only path to manhood that anyone recognized or respected. Marcus had been good at it too. Exceptionally good. His superiors praised his patience, his precision, his ability to remain perfectly still for 18 hours while waiting for a single shot. He had saved American lives. He had completed missions that existed only in classified files. He had done everything his country had asked of him, without question or complaint. But something happened during that 4th deployment that shattered the carefully constructed wall Marcus had built between his duty and his conscience. His unit received intelligence about a high-value target meeting in a compound outside Kandahar. Multiple sources confirmed the location. Satellite imagery showed armed men entering and leaving at irregular intervals. Command authorized a precision strike. Marcus was positioned on a rooftop 800 meters away with his rifle and his spotter. They had been in position for 11 hours when the target finally appeared. In an upper window of the compound, Marcus had perhaps for seconds to make the shot before the target moved out of view. He took the shot. Perfect placement. Center mass. The target dropped instantly. Then the screaming started. Not the screaming of armed combatants scrambling for cover, but the screaming of women and children who had been in the room when the bullet tore through their father, through their husband, through a man who turned out to be a village elder with no connection whatsoever to enemy forces. The intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. The satellite imagery had shown his adult sons carrying farming tools that looked like weapons from orbit. The classified sources had confused him with someone else who had a similar name and lived 3 villages away. Marcus had killed an innocent man while his family watched him die. The military investigation cleared Marcus of any wrongdoing. Official reports stated he had followed proper protocols, acted on credible intelligence, and executed his mission exactly as trained. No charges were filed. No reprimands were issued. Marcus was told that mistakes happen in war, that the fog of combat creates impossible situations, that he should be proud of his service and not dwell on one tragic incident in an otherwise exemplary career. But Marcus could not stop dwelling on it. He could not stop seeing that man's face in the scope. He could not stop hearing the screaming. He could not stop thinking about those children who would grow up without a father. Because Marcus had pulled a trigger, military psychologists later gave this condition a name: moral injury. Different from traditional combat trauma, because the wound comes not from what was done to you, but from what you were ordered to do, from actions that violate your core sense of right and wrong even when those actions were legal, authorized, and carried out perfectly according to military standards. Moral injury does not respond well to standard treatment protocols. You cannot process it through exposure therapy or medicate it away with pills. The guilt becomes part of your identity, a permanent stain that no amount of reasoning or rationalization can wash clean. Marcus finished his deployment and returned to the United States with a chest covered in commendations and a mind that would not stop replaying that single moment. He came home to his wife Jennifer and their 4-year-old son David in a modest house near Camp Pendleton, California. Jennifer had been counting the days until his return. She had maintained their home, raised their son alone, and kept her fear buried deep where it could not interfere with being strong. She had prepared his favorite foods and decorated the house with welcome home signs. She had coached David on what to say when Daddy finally walked through that door. But the man who walked through that door was not the man who had deployed 12 months earlier. Jennifer noticed immediately that something was wrong. Marcus smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. He hugged David, but his body remained rigid and distant. He said all the correct things, but his voice sounded hollow, as if he were reading lines from a script someone else had written. Jennifer told herself this was normal. Everyone said that reintegration took time. Everyone said that combat veterans needed space to readjust. She believed that patience and love would eventually bring her husband back to her. She was wrong. The nightmares started within the first week. Violent nightmares that had Marcus screaming himself awake at 3 in the morning. Drenched in sweat and unable to remember where he was, Jennifer would hold him and whisper reassurances until his breathing normalized and his hands stopped shaking. David started having nightmares too, disturbed by the sounds of his father's anguish bleeding through the bedroom walls. Jennifer tried to maintain normalcy during the day. She tried to pretend everything was fine. She tried to believe that time would heal what war had broken. Marcus went to his appointments at the military medical facility. He took the medications they prescribed. He attended mandatory counseling sessions and support groups for returning combat veterans. None of it helped. The medications made him feel numb and disconnected without actually removing the guilt. The therapy sessions felt performative, as if he were supposed to process his trauma according to some predetermined timeline. That had nothing to do with his actual experience. The support groups were full of men who seemed to be coping better than he was, which only reinforced his growing belief that he was uniquely broken, fundamentally damaged in ways that could not be repaired. Marcus started drinking 6 weeks after returning home. Just a beer or 2 in the evening at first, something to quiet the noise in his head long enough to fall asleep. But 2 beers became 5. 5 became 8. 8 became a bottle of whiskey that Marcus kept hidden in the garage. The alcohol did not erase the memories, but it made them blurry enough that Marcus could function during the day, or at least he convinced himself that he was functioning. Jennifer watched her husband disappear into the bottle and felt utterly helpless. She tried gentle conversations about cutting back. She tried tears and ultimatums. She tried hiding the alcohol and refusing to buy more. Nothing worked. Marcus would promise to stop, would swear that this time was different, would manage to stay sober for 3 or 4 days before the guilt became unbearable, and he started drinking again. Jennifer started going to support groups for military spouses. She learned about enabling and boundaries and tough love. She learned that sometimes loving someone means refusing to participate in their self-destruction. The final breaking point arrived on a Saturday afternoon in November. Marcus was supposed to take David to a birthday party for one of his preschool classmates. Simple task. Basic parenting. Marcus said yes, of course, no problem. But when Jennifer returned home 3 hours later, David was still sitting on the couch in his party clothes, clutching the wrapped present they had bought together. Marcus was passed out drunk in the garage, an empty whiskey bottle on the workbench beside him. David was 4 years old, and he had spent those 3 hours waiting for a father who never came. Jennifer Chen made a decision that afternoon that would haunt her for years, but that she knew was necessary. She told Marcus to pack his things and leave. Not tomorrow, not after he sobered up. Right now. Marcus tried to apologize. He tried to explain. He tried to promise that it would never happen again. But Jennifer had heard these promises too many times before. She told him that she loved him and would always love him, but that she could not allow him to damage their son the way he was damaging himself. She told him that he could come back when he was sober, when he was getting real help, when he was capable of being a father again. Until that day arrived, he needed to go. Marcus packed a duffel bag while David watched from the hallway with confused eyes. That would appear in Marcus's nightmares for years afterward. He kissed his son goodbye and tried to explain that Daddy had to go away for a while, but would come back soon. David asked when soon was. Marcus had no answer. He drove to a motel on the outskirts of town and checked in for a week, telling himself that would be enough time to prove to Jennifer that he could get his life together. That week became 2 weeks. 2 weeks became a month. A month became 3 months of Marcus drinking alone in a $15 a night motel room, while his savings account drained away and his connection to everything that mattered slowly dissolved. When Marcus's money finally ran out, the motel manager gave him 24 hours to pay or vacate. Marcus did not have the money. He loaded his few possessions into his truck and drove away with no destination in mind and no plan beyond surviving one more day. That was March 2014, the month Marcus Chen became homeless, not through a single catastrophic event, but through a slow accumulation of small failures that eventually added up to total collapse. He lived in his truck for 5 months, moving between parking lots and side streets, always one step ahead of police who would tell him he could not sleep there. He picked up day labor jobs when he could find them, cash under the table work that paid just enough for food and gas. Marcus told himself this was temporary. He told himself he was just going through a rough patch. He told himself that any day now he would pull himself together and start the long climb back to normalcy. But the drinking continued, the guilt continued, the nightmares continued, and slowly, inevitably, Marcus stopped believing his own lies. He stopped trying to find work. He stopped calling Jennifer. He stopped pretending that tomorrow would be different from today. When the truck was repossessed for missed payments, Marcus did not even try to fight it. He just took his duffel bag and started walking. The next 2 years were a blur of shelters and soup kitchens and sleeping under bridges. Marcus drifted south from California into Arizona, then east through New Mexico and Texas. He followed warm weather and rumors of cities that were more tolerant of homeless populations. He learned the unwritten rules of street survival: where to find food, where to sleep safely, how to avoid cops, how to make yourself small and invisible so people would not bother you. He became skilled at disappearing, at occupying space without anyone noticing he was there. The world had decided Marcus Chen did not matter, and Marcus had stopped arguing with that assessment. Ranger entered Marcus's life on a brutally hot afternoon in Houston, Texas. In August 2016, Marcus was trying to sleep under an overpass, seeking shade from temperatures that had reached 107 degrees. He woke up to find an orange tomcat sitting approximately 3 feet away, staring at him with intense yellow eyes. The cat was lean and scarred, with a notched left ear and a crooked tail that looked like it had been broken at some point and healed incorrectly. He was clearly a street cat, probably feral, definitely dangerous if provoked. Marcus tried to shoo him away. The cat did not move. For 3 days, that cat followed Marcus everywhere. When Marcus walked to a different location, The cat followed 10 paces behind. When Marcus sat down to rest, the cat sat nearby but never came close enough to touch. When Marcus went to a church that was serving free lunch, the cat waited outside until Marcus emerged. Marcus tried everything to lose this persistent shadow. He walked for miles in the wrong direction. He hid in places the cat could not follow. He even threw rocks in the cat's general direction, not trying to hit him but trying to scare him away. Nothing worked. That cat had decided that Marcus belonged to him, and no amount of resistance was going to change his mind. On the 4th day, Marcus gave up fighting. He was sitting in the shade behind a closed gas station when the cat finally approached, moving slowly and deliberately, maintaining eye contact the entire time. The cat came within arm's reach, then closer, then actually pressed his body against Marcus's leg. Marcus reached down to pet him, and the cat erupted into the loudest purr Marcus had ever heard. That sound, that simple expression of contentment and trust, broke something inside Marcus that had been frozen for 2 years. He started crying. He sat behind that gas station with his hand on a stray cat's back, and he cried for the first time since returning from Afghanistan. Marcus started calling the cat Ranger, the term used for elite soldiers in the Army Rangers, because this cat moved like a combat veteran who had seen things and survived them. Ranger needed food, so Marcus started begging more actively, standing on street corners with a sign asking for anything people could spare. Most people ignored him. Some people yelled at him to get a job. A few people gave him money, usually without making eye contact. Marcus used whatever he collected to buy cheap cat food from dollar stores. He ate whatever was left over. On days when there was not enough money for both of them, Marcus made sure Ranger ate. The cat had chosen to stay. The least Marcus could do was keep him alive. Having Ranger changed Marcus in ways that were difficult to articulate, but impossible to deny. For the first time since Jennifer had asked him to leave, Marcus had a reason to wake up beyond simple survival. Ranger depended on him. Ranger trusted him. Ranger chose to stay with him even though leaving would have been easier and safer. That loyalty, that unconditional acceptance from a creature who owed him nothing, gave Marcus something he had not felt in years: purpose. Not happiness or hope or any of the bigger emotions he had stopped believing he deserved. Just purpose. A reason to keep going. A reason to try. Marcus and Ranger spent the next 3 years living on the streets together. They moved from Houston to Dallas, then from Dallas to Little Rock, then from Little Rock to Memphis, always following weather patterns and rumors of cities with better resources for homeless populations. They survived a winter in Memphis where temperatures dropped to 8 degrees, and Marcus seriously thought they might both freeze to death. They survived a summer in Shreveport where the heat index reached 115, and shade was impossible to find. They survived because they had each other. Marcus kept Ranger alive, and Ranger kept Marcus alive, though neither of them could have explained exactly how that exchange worked. During those 3 years, Marcus remained completely invisible to the thousands of people who saw him every single day. Commuters stepped over his legs without acknowledging his existence. Business owners called police to remove him from their doorways. Teenagers threw fast food trash at him for entertainment. Police officers moved him along with threats of arrest if he did not comply immediately. Marcus accepted all of this as the natural consequence of his failures. He believed he deserved to be invisible. He believed he deserved to suffer. Ranger was the only evidence that maybe, possibly, he still had some small amount of worth left. By November 2019, Marcus and Ranger had ended up in Richmond, Virginia. Marcus had heard through the homeless network that Richmond had strong services for veterans, that the medical facilities actually cared about helping people instead of just processing paperwork, that there were organizations genuinely committed to getting homeless veterans off the streets. He thought maybe he might be ready to try again. He thought maybe he had punished himself long enough. He thought maybe there was a path back to being human again. Then winter arrived early and vicious, and Marcus found himself sleeping in the doorway of a bookstore, trying to keep Ranger warm while temperatures plummeted toward freezing. The bookstore was called Turning Pages, and the owner was a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to Marcus despite sharing his last name. Patricia had noticed Marcus sleeping in her doorway for a week straight. She had called the police twice, but they told her there was nothing they could do unless he was actively breaking the law. Patricia was frustrated. She had a business to maintain. She had customers who complained about having to step around a homeless man to enter her store. She had worked too hard building this bookstore to have it become known as a place where vagrant people congregated. But Patricia also had a conscience that would not let her simply ignore Marcus. Her younger sister had struggled with addiction and mental health issues. Before dying of an overdose 3 years earlier, Patricia had watched her family try everything to help her sister, and she had watched her sister reject that help over and over until it was too late. She saw echoes of her sister in this homeless veteran sleeping in her doorway. She saw the same defeat in his eyes, the same sense of having surrendered to forces beyond his control. So Patricia started leaving a thermos of hot coffee and a bag of pastries outside her door every morning before Marcus woke up. She told herself this was practical rather than charitable. If she kept him fed, maybe he would not try to break into her store. But the truth was more complicated. The truth was that Patricia could not help her sister, but maybe she could help this stranger. Emma Rodriguez was 8 years old and in 3rd grade at Richmond Elementary School. Her mother, Jessica, worked as a paralegal for a law firm in downtown Richmond, which meant Emma spent every weekday afternoon in an after-school program until Jessica finished work. Every single day after Jessica picked up Emma from the after-school program, they walked exactly 4 blocks to the parking garage where Jessica kept her Honda Civic. And every single day, they walked directly past the bookstore where Marcus and Ranger slept in the doorway. Emma noticed them immediately the first time they passed. While her mother walked quickly with her eyes fixed straight ahead, Emma stopped and stared. She stared at Ranger mostly because Emma had been begging for a cat since she was 5 years old, and her mother kept saying, "Maybe next year." But she also stared at Marcus, at the way he positioned his body to shield Ranger from the wind, at the way he made sure the cat ate before he ate, at the way he gently stroked Ranger's fur while they both tried to sleep on frozen concrete. Emma asked her mother why that man was sleeping outside with his cat. Jessica gave the standard parental response designed to acknowledge the situation, without really explaining it. She said that sometimes people have hard times and end up without homes. Emma asked why he did not just go home then. Jessica tried to explain that he probably did not have a home to go to. Emma asked why nobody helped him get a home. Jessica did not have a good answer for that question. She mumbled something about it being complicated and kept walking toward the parking garage. But Emma kept thinking about it. For 2 weeks, Emma observed Marcus and Ranger every afternoon. She noticed that Marcus was always gentle with the cat even when he looked exhausted. She noticed that people walked past without looking at them, as if they were invisible. She noticed that Marcus never asked anyone for anything, never held out a cup or a sign, just sat quietly with his cat and tried to take up as little space as possible. Emma could not understand why adults were able to walk past someone who was clearly suffering without stopping to help. She asked her mother about it multiple times. Jessica tried to explain that helping homeless people was complicated, that you could not help everyone, that sometimes people ended up on the streets because of their own bad choices. Emma rejected these explanations. She was 8 years old and her understanding of the world was still uncomplicated by the rationalizations adults used to justify their indifference. She saw a man who loved his cat. She saw a cat who refused to leave that man. She saw suffering that could be acknowledged even if she could not solve it. So Emma decided to do something. She took a piece of notebook paper and a purple crayon from her school supplies. She thought carefully about what to write. She wanted to say something that mattered. She wanted to say something true. She wrote 7 words in careful block letters, her spelling perfect because she had her mother check it. She folded the note and put it in her backpack. The next afternoon, when Jessica and Emma walked past the bookstore, Marcus was asleep in the doorway. Ranger was curled up on his chest, also sleeping. Emma walked over to the doorway before her mother could stop her. She placed the note carefully on top of Marcus's sleeping bag, where he would definitely see it when he woke up. Then she walked back to her mother, took her hand, and continued toward the parking garage. Jessica had seen what Emma did, but she did not ask about it immediately. Some instinct told her this was important. that whatever her daughter had just done mattered in ways she did not fully understand yet. Marcus woke up 3 hours later as the winter sun was setting, and temperatures were beginning their nightly plunge toward freezing. Ranger stretched and jumped down to investigate interesting smells near a trash can. Marcus sat up slowly, every joint in his 42-year-old body aching from another day spent sleeping on concrete. That was when he saw the note, a piece of white paper, neatly folded, sitting on top of his sleeping bag. Marcus could not remember the last time someone had left him anything. That was not an official document or a citation from police. He picked up the paper carefully, as if it might disintegrate. He unfolded it and read what was written there in purple crayon. "You are not invisible. You matter." The note was signed with Emma's name and a carefully drawn heart. Marcus stared at those 7 words for a very long time. He read them again and again, trying to process what they meant, trying to understand if this was real or if exhaustion and hunger were making him hallucinate. Someone had seen him, not just glanced at him while hurrying past, but actually seen him, seen that he was a person, seen that he was suffering, seen that his existence meant something. A child had looked at him and decided that he deserved to know he mattered. Something fundamental shifted inside Marcus in that moment. Something that had been frozen solid for 5 years began to thaw. He sat in that doorway holding a note from a child he had never met, and he began to cry. He cried for the man he had killed in Afghanistan. He cried for Jennifer and David. He cried for the 5 years he had wasted believing he deserved to be invisible. He cried because an 8-year-old girl had shown him more compassion than he had shown himself. Since returning from war, Ranger came back from his investigation and climbed into Marcus's lap, purring with unusual intensity, as if he understood that something important was happening to his human. Patricia Chen was locking up the bookstore for the evening when she glanced through the window and saw Marcus crying in her doorway. She had never seen him display any emotion before. He had always been still and quiet and ghost-like, there but not there, existing without really living. But now he was sobbing like something inside him had broken open. Patricia felt concerned despite her best efforts to maintain professional distance. She told herself to leave it alone. She told herself that getting emotionally involved with homeless people always ended badly. But then she saw the piece of paper clutched in Marcus's hand and curiosity overwhelmed caution. Patricia opened the door and stepped outside into the cold evening air. Marcus looked up, startled, as if he had forgotten other people existed. Patricia asked if he was okay, then immediately felt ridiculous, because obviously he was not okay. Marcus did not answer with words. He just held up the note so Patricia could read it. She read those 7 words written in purple crayon and felt something shift in her chest. Some wall she had built after her sister died beginning to crack. Patricia made a decision that would alter multiple lives, including her own. She told Marcus to wait right there. She went back inside, grabbed her purse and her keys and her phone. She came back out and told Marcus she was taking him to the hospital. Not asking, telling, Marcus started to protest. He said he was fine. He said he did not need help. He said all the things people say when they are absolutely not fine and desperately need help, but cannot admit it. Patricia cut him off. She told him she did not care what he thought he needed. She told him she was not leaving him in this doorway for another night. She told him to get his things and get in her car right now. Marcus looked at Ranger. He looked at his sleeping bag and his backpack, the sum total of everything he owned. He looked at the note in his hand, at those 7 words that had cracked something open inside him. Then he looked at Patricia, at this stranger offering him something he had not experienced in 5 years. A choice, a doorway, a possible path forward. Marcus stood up slowly, his body protesting every movement. He scooped up Ranger and held him close. He gathered his meager possessions. He followed Patricia to her car. The emergency room at the Richmond Medical Center was overwhelmed that evening. Patricia and Marcus waited for hours in plastic chairs bolted to the floor, while people with more urgent problems were called back ahead of them. A social worker eventually emerged. A woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a name tag that read Diane Foster. Diane had been doing this work for 23 years. She had seen thousands of homeless veterans cycle through these doors. Most of them were not ready for help. Most of them would accept a meal and a bed for one night, then disappear back to the streets. Before anyone could intervene meaningfully, Diane had learned to protect herself emotionally by not investing too heavily in outcomes she could not control. But something about Marcus was different. Maybe it was Ranger, purring in Marcus's lap and refusing to be separated from him. Maybe it was the note Marcus kept touching like a talisman. Maybe it was the fact that he had come voluntarily instead of being brought by police. Whatever the reason, Diane saw something in Marcus Chen that made her think this one might actually make it. She sat down across from Marcus and Patricia and asked Marcus the most important question. Not what happened to you or what do you need, but do you want help? Marcus looked down at Ranger. He looked at the note folded carefully in his pocket. He thought about Emma, an 8-year-old girl who had seen him when 40,000 adults had looked away. He thought about whether he wanted to die in a doorway, or whether he wanted to try one more time to live. Marcus looked up at Diane Foster and said yes, he wanted help. That night, Marcus was admitted to the residential treatment program at the medical center. It was an intensive 90-day program combining medical detox from alcohol, psychiatric treatment for trauma, and vocational rehabilitation to prepare veterans for employment. The first week was absolutely brutal. Withdrawal from 5 years of heavy drinking felt like every cell in Marcus's body was simultaneously dying. He shook uncontrollably. He vomited everything he tried to eat. He hallucinated conversations with people who were not there. He begged the nurses to let him leave, to let him go back to the streets where at least the suffering was familiar. But Diane checked on him every single day. She reminded him why he was there. She showed him Emma's note whenever he said he wanted to quit. And slowly, agonizingly, Marcus survived that first week. The second week was marginally better. The physical symptoms of withdrawal began to fade into something manageable. Marcus could eat solid food without immediately vomiting. He could sleep for 3 or 4 hours at a time instead of jolting awake every 20 minutes. He started attending mandatory group therapy sessions and individual counseling appointments. He started talking about Afghanistan for the first time since returning home. His therapist was a veteran who had served in Iraq, someone who understood moral injury in ways civilian therapists could not. For the first time, Marcus felt like someone actually heard what he was trying to say. During the third week, Marcus asked about Ranger. The facility had strict policies about animals, but Diane had quietly bent those rules. She had taken Ranger home with her that first night and had been caring for him ever since. She brought photos to show Marcus that Ranger was safe and healthy and being thoroughly spoiled. Marcus cried when he saw those photos. He had been so focused on his own survival that he had almost forgotten about the cat, who had kept him alive for 3 years. Diane promised that when Marcus completed the program, Ranger would be waiting for him. That promise became Marcus's anchor during the hardest days. By the 4th week, Marcus began to believe that recovery might actually be possible. He was attending every therapy session without resistance. He was participating actively in group discussions instead of sitting silently. He was working with a vocational counselor to identify potential career paths. He was taking his psychiatric medications consistently. He was eating 3 meals a day. He was sleeping through most nights without nightmares. He was slowly remembering what it felt like to be human instead of just surviving. But Marcus kept thinking about Emma. He kept wondering who this 8-year-old girl was. What had made her stop and see him when everyone else looked away? Whether she had any idea what her 7 words had set in motion. He asked Diane if there was any way to find Emma and thank her properly. Diane said she would try, but Richmond was a city of 200,000 people and all they had was a first name and a purple crayon. It seemed impossible. Patricia had not forgotten about Marcus or about that note. She visited Marcus twice at the treatment facility, bringing books and magazines and updates about the world outside. She told Marcus she had been asking her regular customers if anyone knew a 3rd grader named Emma. She had posted about the incident on the bookstore social media pages, carefully protecting Marcus's privacy while explaining that a child's compassion had potentially saved a life. She had printed flyers and distributed them to nearby schools. She was determined to find this child. 6 weeks into Marcus's treatment, a customer came into the bookstore and said her daughter attended Richmond Elementary, and there was definitely an Emma Rodriguez in 3rd grade. The customer had asked her daughter about it, and the daughter confirmed that. Emma had been talking about a homeless man with an orange cat. Patricia got contact information for Emma's mother, Jessica, and called her that evening. Jessica was initially skeptical, worried this might be some kind of scam or manipulation. But Patricia explained everything, and Jessica began crying on the phone. Jessica told Patricia that Emma had been asking about the homeless man every single day. Emma wanted to know if he was still sleeping in the doorway, if he was warm enough, if his cat was okay. Jessica had not known what to tell her daughter because when they walked past the bookstore now, Marcus and Ranger were gone. Emma was convinced she had somehow made things worse by leaving that note, that maybe she had gotten the man in trouble. Now Jessica could tell her daughter the truth. Emma had not made things worse. Emma had saved a life. Patricia arranged for Marcus and Emma to meet at the bookstore on a Saturday afternoon. In late January, Marcus was 70 days into treatment. He was sober and healthy and beginning to look like a completely different person. His hair was cut professionally. His face was cleanly shaved. He wore clothes that actually fit. Most importantly, the emptiness that had lived in his eyes for 5 years was beginning to be replaced by something that looked almost like hope. Diane drove Marcus to the bookstore with Ranger in a carrier, the cat meowing indignantly about being confined. Emma arrived with Jessica, holding her mother's hand tightly, simultaneously nervous and excited. She walked into the bookstore and saw Marcus standing there. This man who looked nothing like the person she remembered from the doorway. Marcus stood when they entered, suddenly unsure what to say or how to act. This 8-year-old child had seen him at his absolute lowest point, broken and dirty and barely human. How do you thank someone for that? Emma solved the awkward moment by asking the only question that mattered to an 8-year-old. Can I see your cat? Marcus laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in longer than he could remember. He opened the carrier and Ranger jumped out, walking directly to Emma as if he recognized her. Emma sat on the floor and Ranger climbed into her lap, purring louder than seemed physically possible for a cat his size. Emma stroked his orange fur and told him she had been worried about him. Ranger just purred louder. Marcus sat down on the floor next to Emma. He pulled the note from his pocket, worn soft from being folded and unfolded hundreds of times. He told Emma he wanted to thank her. He told her he had been in a very dark place, where he had stopped believing his life mattered to anyone. He told her that her 7 words had reminded him of something he had forgotten, that everyone matters, that everyone deserves to be seen, that sometimes 7 words are enough to save a life. Emma listened with the serious expression children get when they know something important is happening. Then she looked up at Marcus and asked him a question that froze everyone in the room. She asked if he was going to see his own child now. The question caught Marcus completely off guard. He had not mentioned David to anyone except his therapist. He asked Emma how she knew he had a son. Emma said she could tell by watching how he treated Ranger. She said her teacher told their class you could learn everything about how people treat humans by watching how they treat animals. She said someone who loved a cat that much on the streets must really miss their kids. Emma's observation, delivered with the clear logic of a child, hit Marcus harder than any therapy session. This 8-year-old had seen directly into the core of his pain with one sentence. Yes, Marcus said quietly. Yes, he missed his son. Yes, he was hoping to see him again. Yes, he was trying to become the father David deserved. Emma nodded and said she thought he would be a good dad because Ranger loved him. And cats are excellent judges of character. Marcus had to look away because he was crying again, but this time the tears felt different. They felt like healing. Jessica Rodriguez watched this interaction with her own tears falling freely. She had been terrified when Emma first told her about leaving that note. She had worried about teaching Emma to engage with homeless people, about putting her daughter in potential danger, about exposing her to adult problems an 8-year-old should not have to carry. But watching her daughter demonstrate compassion and wisdom far beyond her years, Jessica realized Emma had taught her something profound instead. Children see the world with clarity adults have trained themselves to lose. They see people, not categories. They see humanity, not problems to be managed or ignored. Patricia documented this meeting with permission from everyone present. She took photos of Emma and Marcus sitting on the floor with Ranger between them. She recorded video of Emma telling Marcus about her school projects, and Marcus telling Emma carefully edited stories about his time in the Marines. She captured the moment when Marcus gave Emma a small gift he had created in art therapy, a drawing of Ranger with the words "thank you" written in careful letters underneath. Patricia knew instinctively that the story needed to be shared with the world. That evening, Patricia posted about the meeting on all the bookstore social media accounts. She shared the photos with Emma's face blurred for privacy protection. She posted a clear image of the original note Emma had written. She told the complete story from Marcus sleeping in her doorway to his current recovery journey. She expected maybe a few hundred people might see it and feel moved. Instead, the post exploded. Within 12 hours, it had been shared 8,000 times. Within 24 hours, it reached 400,000 people. Within 72 hours, it was national news. News organizations from across the country contacted Patricia requesting interviews. Morning television shows wanted Marcus and Emma to appear together. Magazine journalists wanted to write feature stories. Social media personalities with millions of followers wanted to amplify the message. Everyone wanted to be associated with this story about a homeless veteran, a loyal cat, and a compassionate child who saw what adults had trained themselves to ignore. Marcus was completely overwhelmed by the sudden attention. He was still in treatment, still fragile, still learning how to be sober and functional. Diane helped him navigate the media requests, carefully selecting opportunities that would help rather than exploit. Marcus agreed to one major interview with a local news journalist who had a strong reputation for sensitive reporting on veteran issues. During that interview, Marcus told his complete story without filters or sanitization. He talked about Afghanistan and the man he had killed. He talked about moral injury and guilt that felt permanent. He talked about his drinking and his homelessness and losing his family. He talked about Ranger and surviving 3 years on the streets. And he talked about Emma, about those 7 words from a child that had pierced through 5 years of believing. He deserved to be invisible. The interview aired on a Thursday evening during prime local news time. By Friday morning, national networks had picked up the story. By Friday afternoon, someone had started a crowdfunding campaign to help Marcus with housing and transitional expenses. By Friday evening, that campaign had raised $60,000. And by Saturday morning, Marcus's ex-wife Jennifer had called the treatment facility asking to speak with him. Jennifer had been living in San Diego with their son David, now 9 years old. She had not heard from Marcus in 5 years. She had assumed he was either dead or so far gone that recovery was impossible. She had grieved him. She had explained to David that sometimes people get so sick they cannot find their way home. She had tried to build a life that did not include waiting for Marcus to return. When Jennifer saw Marcus on television, looking healthy and sober and talking coherently about recovery, she could barely process what she was seeing. She called the television station. She called the treatment facility. She left urgent messages everywhere until Diane finally called her back. Diane explained that Marcus was doing remarkably well, that he had been asking about Jennifer and David, but had been too afraid to reach out because he did not believe he had the right to disrupt their lives. Diane asked if Jennifer would be willing to talk to him. Jennifer said yes before Diane finished asking the question. The phone call between Marcus and Jennifer lasted almost 4 hours. They talked about everything, about the pain Marcus had caused and the guilt Jennifer had carried for asking him to leave, about the years of not knowing whether he was alive or dead, about David and how he asked about his father on every birthday and every Father's Day, about whether there was any possibility of slowly rebuilding trust and connection. Jennifer made no promises. She told Marcus she was proud of him for getting help, but that trust had to be earned back gradually and carefully. She told him that David deserved a father who was stable and present and committed to staying sober. Marcus understood completely. He told Jennifer he was not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation, just for a chance to prove he could be the man they deserved. They agreed to stay in regular phone contact while Marcus completed his treatment. Jennifer would send recent photos of David and share stories about what was happening in his life. Marcus would provide updates on his therapy progress and his plans for after discharge. They would take everything slowly, one conversation at a time. It was not a reunion, but it was a beginning. And for Marcus, that was more than he had dared to hope for in 5 years. The media attention brought unexpected political consequences. A senator from Virginia named Mitchell Crawford saw Marcus's story during a late-night news broadcast and was deeply affected by it. Senator Crawford had been working for 18 months on legislation to improve mental health services and housing assistance for veterans. But his bill had been stuck in committee, blocked by concerns about cost and debates about federal versus state responsibility. He contacted Marcus through Diane and asked if Marcus would be willing to testify before Congress about his experiences. Marcus was terrified by the idea, but Diane encouraged him. She explained that his story could influence policy, could help thousands of veterans who were currently invisible just like Marcus had been. In March of 2020, Marcus Chen testified before the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. He sat at a long table facing senators and staff members and journalists. Wearing a suit Patricia had helped him select, Ranger was not allowed in the hearing room, but Diane sat in the public gallery holding his carrier, so Marcus could see them. Emma and Jessica sat beside Diane. Jennifer had wanted to attend, but could not afford to miss work or pay for travel from California. She watched via the live stream instead, crying at her desk. Marcus told the senators his story without holding anything back. He explained moral injury and how it differs from combat trauma. He described the inadequacy of standard treatment approaches for veterans dealing with guilt over their authorized actions. He detailed how the system had medications and therapy available, but lacked the intensive long-term residential programs that many veterans desperately needed. He explained how easy it was to fall through the cracks, how the system worked reasonably well for veterans who could advocate for themselves, but failed completely for those too broken to ask for help. Then Marcus told them about Emma's note. He pulled the worn paper from his pocket and read those 7 words aloud to the entire Senate chamber. "You are not invisible. You matter." He told the senators that those words had saved his life, but that it should never be an 8-year-old child's responsibility to save a combat veteran. He told them that if the system had worked properly, he never would have ended up sleeping in that doorway. He told them that thousands of veterans were invisible right now, waiting for someone to see them. He told them they had the power to change that reality. When Marcus finished speaking, the chamber was completely silent for several long seconds. Then one senator began clapping, then another. Then the entire room erupted in applause. Multiple senators had visible tears. The committee chairman thanked Marcus for his extraordinary courage in sharing his story and promised his testimony would drive real change. 3 months later, the veterans' mental health legislation passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. It was not perfect. It did not solve every problem, but it allocated substantial new funding for residential treatment programs, created better protocols for identifying at-risk veterans, and established peer support networks specifically for those dealing with moral injury. Marcus graduated from the treatment program in April of 2020 with Ranger by his side. He had earned certificates in computer skills and customer service. The facility connected him with a transitional housing program in Richmond that allowed pets, which meant Ranger could stay with him. Patricia offered Marcus part-time work at the bookstore, shelving inventory and helping customers. It was not glamorous, but it was stable employment with a boss who understood his situation. Marcus accepted gratefully. The crowdfunding campaign had raised over $300,000. By the time Marcus completed treatment, Marcus worked with a financial advisor to manage the money responsibly. He used some for immediate needs like rent, food, and reliable transportation. He established a trust fund for David's future education, and he donated a significant portion to organizations helping homeless veterans, specifically requesting the money support programs that allowed veterans to keep their companion animals. Marcus knew exactly how much Ranger had meant to his survival. He wanted other veterans to have that same lifeline. In June, Jennifer agreed to let Marcus visit David. The meeting would be supervised and brief. Just 2 hours at a neutral park location halfway between Richmond and San Diego. Marcus drove 9 hours with Ranger in the passenger seat, more nervous than he had been before his congressional testimony. He had not seen his son in 5 years. David had been 4 years old when Marcus left. Now he was 9. Marcus had missed kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. He had missed losing baby teeth and learning to read and little league games and birthday parties. He had missed everything. David was shy and uncertain at first, holding tightly to his mother's hand while studying this stranger who was supposedly his father. Marcus did not push. He sat on a park bench and opened Ranger's carrier. The cat stretched and walked over to investigate David. David knelt down and petted Ranger carefully. He told Marcus he liked his cat. Marcus said Ranger had been hoping to meet him. David smiled slightly at that. He asked what else Ranger wanted. Marcus said Ranger wanted to know if David liked adventure stories. David said yes. He loved adventure stories. So Marcus started telling him stories about Ranger's adventures, carefully edited versions that turned traumatic street survival into exciting narratives, appropriate for a 9-year-old. They spent 2 hours at that park. When it was time to leave, David hugged Marcus goodbye. It was brief and awkward, but it was real. Marcus held onto that hug like a lifeline. Over the following months, Marcus and David built their relationship slowly and carefully. Weekly phone calls that gradually became longer. Monthly visits that gradually became more comfortable. David began to trust again. He began to share things about school and friends and interests. He began to remember what having a father felt like. Jennifer watched this process carefully, seeing Marcus show up consistently, seeing him stay sober, seeing him become someone David could depend on. In October, Jennifer invited Marcus to have dinner at their home for the first time in 5 years. Emma Rodriguez continued following Marcus's journey. Patricia kept her updated with photos and stories. Emma was amazed that her note had led to congressional testimony and new laws. And all these changes, she told her mother she did not really understand why everyone thought it was such a big deal. She had just told the truth. The man and his cat were not invisible. They did matter. It seemed obvious to her. Jessica tried to explain that adults often forget simple truths, that sometimes grown-ups build walls around their hearts that make them stop seeing people. Emma decided she never wanted to build those walls. She wanted to keep seeing everyone, especially the people everyone else walked past. Today, Marcus works full-time as a Veterans Outreach Coordinator for a non-profit organization in Richmond. His job involves connecting homeless veterans with services, advocating when systems fail them, and being the person he wishes had existed during his darkest years. He has personally helped place 43 veterans into treatment programs. Ranger, now 7 years old, has become something of a therapy cat, visiting veterans in transitional housing and providing the same non-judgmental companionship that saved Marcus's life. Marcus has been sober for over 2 years. He sees David regularly. He and Jennifer are cautiously exploring whether they might rebuild their relationship, but they are taking it slowly because they both understand that healing cannot be rushed. Marcus keeps Emma's note in his wallet, protected in a plastic sleeve. He pulls it out whenever he has a difficult day, whenever he is tempted to drink, whenever he questions whether his work matters. Those 7 words remind him why he keeps showing up. You are not invisible. You matter. It is a message he received when he needed it most. And now it is a message he spends his life giving to others who have been trained to believe they are invisible. If you have watched this entire story, I want you to do something crucial. The next time you see a homeless person, do not look away. You do not have to solve their problems. You do not have to give money, but see them, acknowledge their existence. Remember they are human beings with stories and pain and worth. Remember that they matter. Remember Emma's note. Remember that 7 words from a child influenced federal legislation and saved multiple lives. Now imagine what might happen if we all stopped walking past, if we all chose to see the invisible people living right in front of us. And if you are struggling right now, if you feel invisible, if you are questioning whether you matter, hear this clearly. You matter. Your pain is real, but it does not define your future. Recovery is possible. Help exists. Keep showing up. Keep trying. Marcus did not believe he would survive. He did not believe he deserved to survive. But he did, and his life now has profound meaning and purpose. Yours can too. Before you go, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because stories like this need to reach as many people as possible. Smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below telling me about a time someone showed you compassion when you desperately needed it, or about a time you showed compassion to someone else. Let us build a community of people who refuse to let anyone be invisible. Thank you for listening to Marcus's story. Thank you for caring. Remember, you matter. Everyone matters, and sometimes 7 words written in purple crayon are enough to change the entire world.